Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cast Dice, the podcast that explores the great big wild world of tabletop gaming that we live in today. It's been said many times, mostly on this podcast, that we are in the middle of a gaming renaissance. There are just too many good games out there that we can be spending our hobby time or our hobby dollars on these days. It can lead to a serious case of what the kids call today a fear of missing out. I think FOMO is what they say. So that's the purpose of this podcast. It's really just to sit down and talk about the tabletop games that my guests and I have been enjoying, industry events, and gatherings where people play the games that we love. Now, if you are an old school fan of when I used to do shows on WWPD, and actually this gentleman predates that even. Back before the LRDG was part of the Bolt Action Alliance, which was part of boltaction.net before that. I mean, man, it goes way back. My brother from another mother, the Chuck Norris himself, who rides in on Grimlock, Patchimus Prime, the one, the only, Patch. Welcome back to Cast Dice.
Hello, Brad.
Man, it is so good to hear that voice. How you been?
Really good, thank you. Really good. Yeah.
Now, it's one thing that, we literally talk every single day. Every day via Messenger. But that's one thing, but it's another thing to hear your dulcet tones, my friend. How are you?
I think everything's going really well, and you're right. It's really nice to speak. We should do it more often.
Amen. A good Skype date, man.
Yeah.
That's
but
it.
then our partners hear us talking about all our nerdy stuff.
Yes.
It's much easier to do that via Messenger.
It is. You can hide in the corner while you're cooking dinner and send a cheeky couple of lines, as opposed to when my wife hears me bellowing through a microphone at the other end of the house, as she occasionally puts it. Hey, Patch, guess what? Apparently I'm loud.
Yeah. Do you know what would be the worst thing, bud? It'd be like, hey, Brad, I'm thinking about purchasing some new AdMech stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say that out loud.
No.
Actually, I should watch my voice.
Notice I'm not saying anything. Yes. There is. Yes. There's actually, and I think I sent you one of these earlier today. For those listening who have been following the show, you know that I've been one of my little pet projects for the last couple of years / recently, in particular, has been recreating the G.I. Joe toys I had as a kid as 1/56 scale toy soldiers, so I can play, bolt action equivalents with them in other games like 7TV. And there's a wonderful mountain of memes of people hiding their G.I. Joe acquisitions from their spouses. So yes, I don't have any of those memes saved on my phone right now. Anyway, moving on quietly.
I will say now that my son is 7, and I know I'm going to go on a tangent here, Brad.
Oh, please do. I was about to ask you about this. Yeah.
And I've got for him a subscription for the Conquest magazine, which, if anyone's not aware, Games Workshop has brought it out, and every month or so they send a magazine out, and it'll have a couple of miniatures attached to it, and it'll have how to build those miniatures, and then how to paint those miniatures, and then how to play the game. And each episode has basic concepts which grow upon the previous one.
Nice.
And so now I feel like it's a totally legitimate expenditure, because my son's right into it, and he's teaching me effectively how to play 40K.
That's awesome.
And he's building all the miniatures, and he's learning how to paint the miniatures, which I'm waiting to get some contrast paints to make it easy for the little fella. But what it does is it sort of justifies the expenditure, because now it's a family thing, right? It's not just Daddy doing it. It's the boys doing it.
Oh man! As soon as I can train my dog to paint, then I will have a similar excuse. But I have a feeling Jim's not going to go for that one. Now, I do have to ask because I've heard a lot of people talking about this, and somebody asked when I was in Good Games playing on the weekend. Somebody was talking about this and said they didn't quite know what it was. The whole Conquest magazine line. Now, is it something that you can get into now? I mean, is it one of those things that you can start at the beginning, or if you missed at the beginning, is it too late now, or do you have to go back and buy back issues through eBay? How does that work?
I don't think so. I think what you can do, and this is what I did, because I came into the subscription, 3 episodes in, and there was an option there to backdate them.
Oh, cool.
So, look, it has its place. I mean, if you're an experienced gamer, for example, you know how to play 40K, you know how to paint the basics, and you know the general lore. You're probably not going to get a great deal out of it, to be honest. For the cost of the subscription, yes, you get some great miniatures out of it, but you could also get them cheaper off eBay, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
What the benefit of it is, and what the greatest thing it can offer is for introducing someone brand new into the game system. Now, and I'll tell you that as a 7-year-old, if he can, and look, I know how to play it, you know what I mean, but I get him to show me how to play it. Yeah. And if he can introduce me to all the basic concepts, and put miniatures together, it's a pretty good deal. And he's got a little folder, and he just goes through step by step. And for example, on the first little game scenario we got to play together, it was a basic shooting scenario, for example. So he taught me about what ranges are, when it comes to shooting, and how to roll for damage, and then how to roll for saves, and then gradually you add movement into it, maybe in the next magazine, and then you might add little bits and pieces. Then I think we're up to squads now. So we've moved from individual miniatures, and now we're at squads in about episode 6, and we're moving squads around this thing, and we're shooting, and we're close combat, we're doing all that stuff, and he can recite all the basic, all the phases of a round within 40K. It's doing all that, and he's loving it, and so it's achieved its purpose.
Now, I'm going to take a left-hand tangent to your tangent, and then we're going to come back. So bear with me while I get a little wacky here. When I was a kid, one of the first games that I picked up and played was BattleTech. And it was a game of giant robots. And back then they were just cardboard counters. But you put them on the board and you moved them around and you shot one another. And, those rules were not wicked complex for their day. And ironically, they haven't changed a whole lot over time. They've updated them a fair bit. But I recently bought the new BattleTech box, the box game, the Game of Armored Combat, I think is what they call it. And I was rereading the rules, and it felt like, to a degree, it was like going home. And it was looking at, God, I remember this. And in certain cases, as I was reading, I was thinking, oh yeah, and then this, and this happened. And as I went down from paragraph to paragraph to paragraph, I was like, oh yeah, crap, I actually know all of this. But I haven't read this, literally since 1989, 1990. But I remember as a kid looking at those rules and being, really intimidated. And they were really straightforward back then. And, my friends and I kind of made it up. And then, we'd play a few games, and then I'd go home and, study the rules again, which often involved me staring at the pictures. But, studied, and then we'd realize we'd done something slightly wrong, and we tried to fix it, or we realized we were basically making up the rules, and we had to go back and try it. But it was this ordeal to learn those rules, and that was not a complex rule set, let alone getting into Car Wars, which, these days I look at and go, yeah, that's too complex for me. Yeah. Now, to have something like that magazine where you're getting, as you say, cool toy soldiers in the mail. Imagine that as a kid and getting that learning to play experience rolled out to you over time with scenarios matching the miniatures that you have, because
Yeah.
you don't, it's not that you need to go out and buy more and convince your parents to buy more. In fact, it's getting delivered to your house. Your parents already paid for it. Man, I would have killed somebody for that kind of thing back in the day. This is marketing gold.
It is really good, and it's following that basic concept, isn't it, of introducing things in small chunks and allowing that knowledge to be cemented through practice before introducing new knowledge. So it's a really, really good introduction for a young one, and now my boy he knows all about 40K, man. He is all over it. He quotes the Lord of Me. He keeps coming up to me going, Dad, who would win, Typhus or Jane Czar?
That's a tough one. That's a tough question.
Man, I don't know. What do you think? And so he can name all the units in a Death Guard army.
Amazing.
I stuff it up and I'll be going, I just want to move my Blightlord Terminators. Dad, they're Death Shroud Terminators, not Blightlord. Sorry, buddy. Got it. Right.
Yep.
So, look, it's all about knowledge for kids, isn't it? And,
it is.
And do you know what he's doing? He's able to interact and play with his dad. It's something his dad loves to do. Yeah. So I think we're all winners.
Yeah, man, that is so cool. Now, you've actually taken this to another level, because Dad of the Year award, you've gone out and you've actually, not only have you got him these models and you're helping him paint, some cases painting with him, sometimes helping him paint, so he's painting them, but you've created interactive terrain and scenarios, and the pictures of the terrain of the games that you play with your son, you made for your son so you guys can just push models around and play games. It's better than most events that people play in. And it's just it's literally just for you and your kid, which is
That's right. Yeah.
Amazing. The just the level of, the eye to detail and just the patch seal of approval level to that is sensational.
Got a table. Yeah, he's got a table set up in his room, and it's like a maybe a 3x2 table. It's not a proper game size, of course, but he gets these bits of terrain and he sets it all out. And then I allow him full access to all my armies. And the caveat is, of course, that he has to take care. Now, I completely understand. Like, miniatures you play with them. Sometimes they get broken, and we have an agreement that as long as he takes as much care as he possibly can, we accept that there's going to be some fair wear and tear, and I can fix whatever he breaks. It's no problems.
Yeah.
So he gets full access to it. So, except for one army, which is AdMech. My new AdMech army for 40K. He's not allowed to touch that one because it's just a little bit too breakable.
Yeah.
but out of that, I'll walk into his room and he's gone, and then he's accessed, the entire Eldar army, and he's set it out in battle formation on the table, and then he's gone and got my Orc army and he's set that out, and he's put back the Death Guard and the Space Marines, and then all of a sudden I'll see maybe the Death Guard the next day, the full Death Guard army playing the Dark Elves, and he'll be going, Dad, which one's going to win?
That is so cool.
I don't know,
man.
mate. You play it out. But it's that, I think, as a little boy, if I could have had one wish, it'd be like, getting access to that, and having the ultimate set of toys on the table. And the good thing, mate, is that, look, from a parenting point of view, he sees that these toys, you know what? Yeah, we've purchased them, sure, but we've spent a lot of time painting them and interacting with them, and playing with them, and they're there to be used. They're not locked away in a cupboard.
Yeah, exactly.
And as long as he takes care of them, and he can do what he wants to.
Man, that's awesome. Oh, so many. I have joked many times online that I wish that you were my dad. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. My dad is, something special. My wife often says that, my wife's family jokes that my dad's like the teddy bear, and he's got the teddy bear gene, and he's like the nicest guy ever. And so, don't get me wrong. My dad's amazing. But my dad also didn't have all those armies in a figure case for me to play with. So I'm just
Yeah. My whole thing is, mate, you know how I love painting, I love playing, and why wouldn't I introduce my family to it if they're interested?
totally.
And like I said, miniatures are there to be used, not to be locked away.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I've been working on at the moment. We're packing up and moving house, and I've been selling a couple of my armies and a bunch of the bits and pieces that have just been sitting. And heaven forbid, my friend, it's the end of an era. I know many long-time listeners of this show will know that when we started podcasting about bolt action way back when, the army I talked about all the time.
Exclusively.
And was a running joke was my Germans. I literally spent, 3 years on that army? Painting the gators took me, months by itself. I did an article and everyone told me I was stupid because I was intricately painting lines, parallel lines on every gator from freehand. Anyway, I sold that army. So it was sitting in a case. It was a bit of an albatross. I had a bunch of armies I'd rather play with. I mean, it's a top tier army. It has all the tanks and all the bits and pieces, but kind of sad to see it go. But I am glad that it got a good home. And if you are listening to this show and you happen to be in Sydney, as of by the time this goes to air, maybe a week after that, my Germans will be living in Hall of Heroes permanently. So
it's a great buy. I think it's such a good iconic army, and
I'm just glad it got a good home.
Yep, someone will be very happy playing that.
Yeah. Well, let's veer back, shall we?
Sure.
Actually, I'm going to stick to our previous tangent for a sec. A little while ago, there was quite the controversy, and maybe it was a year ago. There was quite the controversy because Games Workshop started putting out children's books. And as a primary school teacher, I was fascinated by this. The idea that there would be children running around in the 40K universe and in the Age of Sigmar universe, given how dark and, it's called the grim dark future for a reason. And now there's children reading about children in those environments. Has your son picked up any of those books? Have you got those for him?
Yeah, I bought him. There's two. There were two books out, and I understand that there's new books coming shortly. But one was basically Age of Sigmar, and one was 40K. And I picked up the 40K one for him, and he devoured it. He's certainly reading at a very good level, probably beyond his age. And so I would not necessarily recommend it for a 7-year-old unless they're reading, because it is a little complex. I mean, how can you not try
exactly.
it? It's a sci-fi book and it has some complex things about it. But he it was challenging at parts for him, but what it did was it was a trigger for interaction, if that makes sense.
It does.
So he would read a few pages and then he would talk to me and would talk through what he was reading. He'd be, and then he was so excited because Space Marines turned up and he wanted to talk to me about what Necrons were and I don't, and we just basically used it more as almost like an extra bit of lore that he might have read in the Conquest magazine. He can then, it's also like reading that. So he was really good. Probably 8 to 9 would be a good starting point, but he was ready for it, enjoyed it.
Awesome. And so as a parent, as someone who reads with his kids, I mean, I know you do a lot with your family. Are they quality? I mean, Black Library puts out great stuff. So I was dying to find out from someone who actually has children and who reads with them. I mean, you read a lot of books. It slots in quality wise, if not.
Yeah, perfect. No problems whatsoever. Really good. Really good. Look, I mean, and I'm sure you're obviously very, very aware of what some of the junior fiction and stuff is that's out there. And there's some reasonably crappy ones, and this rates pretty well. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, we thankfully, I teach primary school for those who don't know, and we have quite an impressive school library. We are well funded, which is not something you say often with a public primary school. And so we have access to an incredible resource of a library for our students to pull from. But every now and then, even in that library, kids pull out a book and bring it over. And I think it's because we've exposed them to good literature that, kids will come over to me, 9, 10-year-old kids, and hand me a book and say, Mr. Moore, this is rubbish. And I'm like, can't argue with that.
Kids. But the thing is, it's great because they're able to read it.
Yeah.
And be able to critique it.
Exactly. Critically analyze it and say, I saw the end coming. They're just the verbs, they're not very strong. The adjective, it's just they're just a little. The adjectives are a bit flowery.
You're clearly doing your job.
Yeah. Well, when 9-year-olds start telling you that, you're like, either I've taught you to be way too pedantic, or I'm winning. I can't decide. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah, let's talk war games.
War games. So, all right. It's a big deal this time of year. This is sort of the halfway mark between CanCon one year and CanCon the next. And of course, that means it's time for Wintercon. Now, Wintercon is sort of the testing ground for CanCon, at least for the bolt action game. Now, this is a significant Wintercon because Pete West, the TO with the mostest, has stepped down. So someone else will be taking the reins, and hopefully, thankfully, or any other way, hopefully Pete's playing. So he'll have a chance to actually have some fun that isn't, behind the TO console. Patch, you're going to WinterCon to play bolt action this year. I know you've got some plans. You want to talk about this? Because I know you've been posting online and stirring the pot and winking and grinning. Talk to us, man. Lay it down.
I do like to stir that positive pot.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, so WinterCon this year, it's a really great new and interesting format, and it's going to be a rotating points value per game. There's only 2 points values, and it's 1,300 and 800 points. And so you the rules are you must take the same army, but your list can make up different units within the 800 and 1,300 points.
Cool.
And so it's a really good way, I think, of shaking up, if you like, what meta there is in bolt action. Because as we know, some armies are exceptionally strong at low points level, other armies are stronger at high points level. So it could be a good way of breaking things up. And also, potentially between games, your mindset is a little bit different, so you're not quite getting that run on.
Yeah.
I really approve of this system. I think it's going to be great. So yes, I'm taking what I've termed as, or what I'm using is the Home Guard or Dad's Army list out of the the ancient Great Britain and Commonwealth book.
Come on, it's not that old. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 7 years old, 8 years old, but the list still stands up, and so I'm just going to leverage off the Home Guard list and in that selector rather than use it generic, and go with that because you know what, Home Guard armies are just so rare. Most early war armies are pretty rare. Let's face it, but Home Guard in itself is rarer still. So yeah, I'm going to take Home Guard.
That's cool, man. So I can't ask you about your list because, as you say, it changes.
Of course, yeah.
So
there's no secrets here. You know that for me.
Yeah, well, it's a wonderful thing about having you on, Patch, because some people are like, I'm not really comfortable talking about my list prior to the event, and you're like, let me tell you about what I'm going to do, buddy, and I'm going to do it to your face. So give us some of the broad strokes, because I know you've got a few. I wouldn't say tricksy traps. I would more say you've thought about what goes in your list. You thought about how you're possibly going to play it. And I know that you cater to the mission and your opponent. And I know you, just from talking to you literally every day, there's a lot of variables that are involved. All of that aside, what are some general high points of lists that you're planning on taking?
Yeah, great. Well, I'll speak to the 1,300 point list because that's the list that's padded out the most. And
the big kahuna.
Yeah. And look, I was inspired a fair bit by your, cast recently around the statistics of CanCon. I really enjoyed that episode. I got a lot out of that, and there was some really good surprises for me, and some nodding of heads, and little bit of a yes, I know that, a sort of a feel about it, but I sort of quite inspired by it, and so I guess a high point. I guess I'll start off by saying, it wouldn't be in my mind a home guard army without an inexperienced captain.
Yeah.
Now, I'm running a single platoon at 1,300 points.
Ooh.
All right.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'm thinking early war, like that,
Yes.
or typically those are larger armies. In one platoon.
Yep, I fit 17 order dice in a single platoon.
At 1,300 points.
Yeah.
This is starting to feel claustrophobic, Patch. The walls are coming in on me. Like, stop it.
I really tried my best to try and minimize the amount of dice. But when you're dealing with early war, there's just very little that's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And by using the home guard selector, I can only take one veteran unit. That's it. And that happens to be the next. So I'll call my captain.
Mm-hmm.
So Lord Patchimus is the is the captain. He's an inexperienced old mate, and he's going to be having his crew of 2 blokes around with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to put a captain in there because no one takes him.
Right.
Except for me.
Yeah, except for you.
Yep. I'm probably the only player of no, I'm sure there's others, but almost no one takes a captain, especially not in a single platoon list. And I'm going to take one.
Well, hold on. So, no one took one at CanCon this year, but you've taken one previously. So I
took one previously and came second.
Yeah, exactly. So I think let's not just skate by and say, oh, I'm sure other people. Last year, no one did, and to my knowledge, no one the year before did, but you. So I think that's I think you're allowed to throw out a little internet shade and say I'm the guy who takes a captain.
at least here. And I just see so much value in them, and I know other people don't. But that works into my favor as well because people are either terrified of them because they don't see them or they underestimate them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very rarely do people sort of weigh them up for their true worth, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I'm taking, Lord Patchimus. He's going to roll out there. And then the next unit I'll talk to is the 2 compulsory units in the home guard selector. Mm-hmm. Now I have to take a home guard squad, right? It's part of the selector. The 2 compulsory infantry squads. One's regular and one's the home guard. Now I'm just going full strength with the home guard section, so just taking riflemen, and so a squad of 10 is costing me 70 points. Now they're a little bit better than inexperienced in the sense that they're green, so they can be upgraded, on that lucky roll. But they're my cricket team, so
nice.
That's the Australian Invitational cricket team that's currently in England, who just happened to get caught literally playing a game of cricket when the invasion occurs. So they're in their whites with green baggies, and they're going to be defending the beaches along with the rest of them. And then I've got the regular infantry squad. Now that's one of 3 full strength regular infantry squads that I'm taking. So that's 10-man regular squads. Look, as solid a unit as you're going to get in the game, isn't it? 10 regular soldiers.
Yeah, exactly.
With a light machine gun. And I've got 3 squads of so 30 regular troops. They're just robust squads. There's nothing flash about them, but they'll hold the ground and they can do stuff if they need to. So that sort of makes up that's 4 squads I've got, and then the 5th squad is led by the Prime Minister Churchill.
What?
Now he's I've got the Prime Minister Churchill's miniature in his little black hat and striped suit
with his Tommy gun.
He's carrying a Tommy gun, so he's leading 4 commandos.
Love it.
So effectively, he's like, you know what? I'm not as he was wont to do. Is to get to the front line, and so he skipped out on his minders and he's got into a universal carrier, and he's scooting around the battlefield with 4 bodyguards of commandos.
Love it.
And he's just going to get into the thick of the action. So if you like, I've got commandos are pretty tough.
Yes.
And I've got a little squad of 5, of course, because that's as much as I can go and still fit them in a universal carrier. And so I think that's got a little bit of teeth,
Yes.
you know. And then I've been able to just, of course, the free forward observer, and as much as I kind of it grated on me a little bit to take it, it's pretty hard not to. It's a bit of a given. You got to kind of take it.
Yeah.
And so I've whacked him in there, and I'm taking a medium machine gun.
Love it.
Yep.
Love it.
Yep, regular medium machine gun. I'm taking a boys anti-tank rifle team.
Mm-hmm.
Regular. I'm taking a medium mortar team. I'm taking a sniper team. I'm taking a light howitzer.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like every normal thing that you would take. I've just been able to fit in.
That's awesome.
But where my list has probably the best teeth is around the vehicles.
Yeah.
And I mentioned the Bren carrier before, and I'm taking actually 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and the intention is to have probably the anti-tank rifle and one of the officers, the regular officer, in a the other universal carrier.
Yep.
So they're going to be operating as a pair. And
now hold on, before you move on, I have a question about that. Now, as you know, I've run Indian carriers for years. Big fan. Indian carriers are essentially just the wheeled version of universals. Now, the basic universal transports that you are running, the carriers, are you running one forward-facing LMG and one pintle mount, or because I know there are some weapon options.
You can take an anti-tank rifle, forward-facing anti-tank rifle instead of the LMG.
That's right.
But no, I'm just going to take 2 LMGs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice.
It packs a punch.
It does. Yeah, I love them.
Yeah, particularly if you're coming on from a flank and you get that universal carrier come on from the flank, it's able to do 8 shots.
Mm-hmm.
And if you work it well, you can get a squad or something in the open, point blank, 8 shots, and then your squads jump out and they're able to sort of point blank unload their firearms into the squad as well. So, and plus that universal carrier then provides more of a support firing role with its single LMG.
Well,
yeah.
I always liked running 2 to 3 of them in a group and rolling up a flank and then split firing so that, they would tag team 2 to 3 units, maybe 2 units where, you have 4 dice going one direction, hitting one squad. Now, you're only going to get a couple hits, but you only need 1 hit to get that pin. And then the second machine gun goes to another squad. Meanwhile, the next transport up does the same thing. And then the third transport, all of a sudden, you have 2 squads that have 2 to 3 pins on them each, depending on how your dice go. And then, sure, they can rally. Sure, they can do whatever else. But it means they're not as efficiently moving, firing, or, doing what your opponent wants them to do. You're putting the pressure on.
That's exactly right. And what's probably going to make that even more apparent is those 2 universal carriers will always operate as a crew with an A9 cruiser.
Mm-hmm.
So if you recall, the A9 cruiser was it was the Mark 1 A9 cruiser, and it had the 2 turrets at the front with the MMGs. So it can rack out, and I can rack out with 3 MMGs.
Love it.
For 125 points.
Love it.
So, it can come on the board from the flank with 2 Bren carriers, and all of a sudden you've got 3 MMGs and 4 LMGs, plus whatever's in those universal carriers as a force to deal with. So it's a little sort of armoured fist that the British can put in the field. I would have loved to have been able to run my Vickers VC light tanks, and but I didn't want to go dual platoon. And the only I think the best value you can get from a Vickers VC with the light autocannons is to have 2 of them.
Yeah, you don't want to pair them.
Because they've only got a single firing platform. They don't have multiple. Right. And so you really want to double up by having that second one there. So I've got a little armoured fist with 3 vehicles. And then I've the last vehicle I've put on there is what's going to hold my rear line, my back line together, which is the Armadillo.
I was going to say, is it the Armadillo perchance? Please tell us what this is, because a lot of people don't know.
Yep. Okay, so there was some discussion about this, and I went to the TO and I spoke to him about that, about what version of the rules do we use for the Armadillo. And so for those who would be aware, there's an Armadillo selector in the Great Britain book, the Army book. and it mounts two pintle mounted LMGs with 360-degree arcs, and you can buy a rear-facing heavy autocannon.
That's
for
right.
it. And now that comes in at regular at 95 points.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when the Sea Lion book came out, they completely wiped that off and said, well, that doesn't exist. We're going to create our own. And they put a less than light anti-tank gun on it
Mm-hmm.
and reduced, I think they put one LMG or something like that. But effectively, it made the Armadillo completely pointless in my mind. It was just, it went from being a very, very capable vehicle to being, well, this is just a joke.
Yeah.
And so I had a chat and said, well, which version can I use? And we agreed that the campaign books, for the most part, are subservient to the army books.
Agreed.
And so whatever rule is in the army book is the one that stands.
Mm-hmm.
Because as we know, campaign books and Warlord has gone down a really
Yes.
funny path sometimes around funsies and silly units with which really throws when you're trying to go to events and where you're matching all these up together outside of their theatre specific things, they tend not to work very well.
So wait, you're telling me that you're not 100% on the unit that came out of a book that had a squad of Boy Scouts on roller skates?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that is what I'm saying.
Okay.
So yeah, discounted that. So that's
okay.
And people and the thing is, look, if you really want to use the Armadillo, this is not a unit that you can say, well, I'm in the Western Desert and I'm with my 8th Army and there's an Armadillo. It's just not going to, everyone should call you on that, because this vehicle was designed, to supplement the home guard, because as everyone will be aware, they lost most of their armored vehicles in France, and it takes time to build that. So what's better than just saying, well, let's just put a concrete box on the back of a truck?
Yeah, and that's literally what the Armadillo is. Yeah,
and the actual the heavy autocannon was an autocannon that was used during World War One to mount on some of their aircraft. And so they've literally just put this onto the back of a truck, and it was used primarily as airfield defense. So if you can imagine the fear at the time of gliders coming in, things like that, where they're coming in to take airfields, and these vehicles were really designed to move around and interact and counter those sort of airborne assaults coming in. So I've included one of those in my list, and I think it would be absolutely brutal. It is open topped.
Oh yeah,
it would, it's got its vulnerabilities, but half range for a heavy autocannon is 38 inches.
Why, Patch? Yes, I do know that. In fact,
yeah.
I know that quite well. As a man with several, I'm picking up what you're putting down there.
You know that it's +3 pen, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I do know this.
So it can damage medium tanks at 38 inches from the front.
Yeah, man, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's pinning them every time. So that's and of course HE, and it gets 2 shots. Look, your heavy autocannons are so ridiculously undercosted, and I love it.
Yeah, and I love at the end of version 1, everyone was talking about like how they were suddenly discovered, and we're going, we've been using these for a while, and they were amazing. And then second ed came in, and people talked about them for the first 5 minutes, and then they kind of dropped out again. And sure, I know there's some people using them consistently, but just looking at the CanCon numbers show, the light autocannon's getting a lot more love these days.
Yeah, well, the light autocannon has a bit more prevalence within some of those early war and light vehicles, even as they go through. But is it the 222 has a light autocannon?
It does.
Is that right? So you'll get a few later versions come out, but the heavy autocannon tend to be restricted to anti-aircraft guns, from memory, and a few tanks, a few vehicles. But most of the time they seem to be, used in that anti-aircraft role. And
They are. Yeah.
any aircraft guns are pretty much just, no one takes any aircraft guns. No one's taken aircraft, man. One aircraft was taken at CanCon.
Yeah, that's true. And to be fair, I kind of am happy about that. But remember the olden days when, excuse my dog just running by. Remember the olden days when observers were everywhere. I like I like that it's not. I like that they're not now. But it does mean that certain units that may have appeared on the board before aren't appearing as much because people are trying to shift to face what people are taking. I recently had some World War II stuff printed by the gentleman in the States that does my 3D printing because he prints in resin for me. And I got some awesome, rare World War II vehicles and pieces. And I got a couple of heavy autocannons printed up because I could, and they were there.
Are they Bofors?
So no, they're the Soviet knockoff version of Bofors. So the Soviets bought a few Bofors and then, sort of Control C and then Control V and Control V at their own version, as they were sort of want to do at that point because they needed that. I mean, just kind of like they bought a Christie, or was it a Christie tank? Where did the running system for the fast tanks? So they bought one. Then all of a sudden, a year later, all the Soviet tanks had those wheels, and they're like, "Wait a minute, those look familiar." Yeah. So it's nice to have those there. I just need to paint them and put them into my Soviet army, I think, because they were used. They were there. I mean, they were in the conflict. They were being used, and yet they don't very much appear on bolt-action tabletops.
Yeah, I mean, controversially, I sort of think sometimes that, with the rules, that they may not be as good as what they could be when some units are clearly not being fielded, and that, why is it that we never see this particular type of unit? Did, when Warlord corrected with version 2, did they go too far with one unit? Do they need to bring it back a little bit? I'll give you an example where they've probably got it right would be, say, man-pack flamethrowers.
Yes.
As you would be aware, version 1, every army had as many man-pack flamethrowers as they could possibly get their hands on because they were unit killers. They were guaranteed unit killers. Now, when I play in an event out of 5 games, 3 of those armies may have a flamethrower, a man-portable flamethrower, and only half the time will they actually work. But they're still being taken because when they do work, they're still devastating.
Exactly.
So they've probably got it right. Conversely, we look at aircraft, and I know you sort of feel that they're at the right spot, but I kind of feel that if we're only seeing one aircraft out of 70 armies, I feel there is something there which is causing a lack of diversity, and that I think the main strength of bolt action is diversity, in that you can take so many different units. But if 69 of those 70 people feel that it's not even on their table as an option, maybe it needs to be tweaked back a little bit, and so that it makes it more attractive. Because as I've spoken about in depth previously, the worst thing that could ever happen to bolt action is you turn up to an event and there are 70 of the same unit, 70 of the same armies on the table, because everyone's worked out that this is the army that works.
Yeah, I mean, that's the death of many a game system, when people figure out the efficiencies and they move on. I listen to, and again, slight tangent here, but I listen to a lot of Star Wars Legion podcasts, and I think Legion's finally hit its stride, and that there's enough variety that you suddenly have, diversity in leadership, which causes diversity in tactics, which causes diversity in unit selection. And you're not always seeing the same 3 units and the same general leading the same army every single time. That said, people are still using the language of efficiencies, and they're still talking about what's the best unit and how do I maximize that in my list. Can I have 3 snipers? Can I have 3 blah, blah, blah? When you go, and of course I'm talking Legion where you can have 3 snipers. But you think, okay, how about we talk about the synergies within our list? How about we talk about
Yeah.
never tell me the odds? I mean, sure, you don't want to take things that aren't necessarily great, but in a game like Legion, where most of it is pretty damn well balanced,
Yeah.
where's the rest of it? And I mean, Bolt Action's a unique game in that it is, sure, there are the units that are great. There are units that are high performing for their points values, that work well with other units. They're just general all-arounders. Veteran units are always, infantry units are always going to be great. But there's very few units that are just outright terrible. And if you build a force in Bolt Action, you can play it well.
Yeah. Everything, like you can take an army, and if you're a skilled player, you can do well with it no matter what it is.
Exactly.
Yep. For sure.
I mean, people joke about, Norwegians, Italians, but you can make a legit army out of all of those.
Totally.
And people are like, but the Norwegians, you only get like a medium machine gun and a light howitzer and a medium mortar and a bunch of dudes with rifles. Yeah. And turns out you can win a game with that. And I'm not saying you can win a game with that out there. You can legit win if you know what you're doing.
Well, I'll give you an example, right? Now, today I was pointed to, like, I occasionally get on the Bolt Action Reddit page. Subforum.
Oh man, yep.
Yeah, I just get on there occasionally and have a bit of a look and interact a little bit. And some guy had asked about Australians. I want to build an Australian army. Where do I start? Are they any good? How do I want to do it to compete against my mates, Japanese. And one of the very first comment that comes on there was this guy who said, well, for a start, don't use the Australian list. Throw that out. Use the Commonwealth list.
Wow.
Throw some Gurkhas in there and a Chaffee, and you'll start winning games. and I've gone, okay, you can do that.
How about
you
no?
can play the game. You can play the game however you want, but you're not playing Australians. You're playing British or US, really, aren't you? You're not even getting close to playing Australians. And so it's people not understanding. The comment that I got back was, if you expect to pick up an Australian army out of the New Guinea book and play it like you would a European army of late war Germans or, the British or the Americans, well, you're going to fail, because the strength in that list is not in the traditional way that people play their games, by relying on a vehicle and relying on a few different things and it's not. You have to have a look at what strength that army brings to the table. And out of all the armies available in Bolt Action, it is the premier unit for forward deployment.
Yeah.
Right?
It is.
You have to use that. So what does that mean? Well, that means that I've got to play differently. I've got to, own the center of the table every game. I put my troops up there. I dig them in. I put them behind hard cover, and I look at my strategies about how I'm going to do that. Now this gentleman was playing Japanese, and I playing against the Japanese, and I suggested that what he does, for example, is the strength in a Japanese list is the way it charges forward, right? If you're not using Japanese, their Banzai rule, you're not really using the strength of the Japanese list a lot.
Right.
So most Japanese players are going to Banzai, right? They're going to charge forward. They want to get into close combat with you. So you develop a screen of troops at the 24-inch mark, and you start chipping away at them from the very first turn. Right, you're putting pins on them. I know pins don't matter too much, but you're still taking an occasional casualty.
Pins matter,
and then
yep,
pins matter, and then you get those guys to fall back, because if you recall, one of the Australian special rules that you can take is advance into ambush, but only towards your back line.
That's right.
So you can advance back into ambush and then get these guys at more favourable conditions. You're going to wear them down, but then you've got a solid screen behind, right, of more regular infantry. And you've got that second screen to fall back to. Once the Japanese are drawn forward, you flank with some commandos. and
Yeah.
those guys will be coming in, packed full SMGs and all the amazing stuff that commandos can bring to the table. And now all of a sudden, your mate's Japanese force is caught in between, some fairly staunch defenders and some really aggressive attackers. So you sort of see there that you can take any list in bolt action, but you've got to look to the strength. You cannot pick up every army and say, I'm going to play this like my late war Germans.
Exactly. And the Japanese in particular don't necessarily play. They're not as point and clicky as people often let on. Being an experienced Japanese player. Now, if you are playing the Bamboo Horde and you're just charging at people, that's one thing. You're playing a very point and click army then, aren't you? But if you're playing a regular rifleman-based army, or you're playing even militia and you're sort of hoarding and running at people, now you can play that point and clicky. But the second that you want to start, and people talk about how good down is in second edition, if you're gonna, if those British come in, then I'm gonna go down. Okay, cool, go down. Now you're not charging. Now you've lost your tactic. Now look, you've prevented them from doing what they want to do, and you've succeeded. So, yeah.
Yep, totally. Yeah, so it's just basically play to your strengths.
Yeah.
A lot of diversity out there and use it.
Exactly. And again, build an army list around how you want to play. Have a plan.
Yeah.
Which is why I think you do well with these armies that some people look at and scratch their head and go, I don't get it. And you go, well, I've thought about it for a little bit, and let me tell you, it's not the internet wisdom.
Who would have thought an inexperienced French army would come second at CanCon, right?
Look, man, I'm not surprised. I'm saying, I know you know what you're doing. Yeah.
Hey, can we talk another game system that I'm really enamored with at the moment?
If it's the game system I'm also enamored with, and I think you're going to bring up, I am going to be giving you an all enthusiastic thumbs up. Are we talking about Rick's game?
Yes, we are.
Warlords of Erehwon.
Warlords of Erehwon. Yep.
Talk to me, brother. Talk to me.
So, look, it's in the same family as Bolt Action, obviously. But it does so many things better than Bolt Action.
Ooh, those are controversial words. But look, man, I'm not gonna lie. I love the Warlords of Erehwon rules. I love the way the reaction system is fantastic. The way that it uses its stats to boost the toughness of troops and the accuracy of shooting, and the way hand-to-hand works with the pins. It feels good. It feels good to play.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with it, and we've been sort of flirting with it a little bit in my crew. We've had a couple of games and we're mucking around with lists. We sort of had this bit of a surge where we all got in and played a couple of games, and then we sort of withdrew to basically reconsider our approach and to start thinking about what armies we've got, start building armies up, because almost everyone went, all right, I'm going to build a new army now. Now that I get the mechanics, let's do something different, And so people are pulling out their old, Warhammer fantasy armies from 1982, which are basically just a bit of lead, semi-shaped like a figure.
Yes.
But they're pulling these out, dusting them off and going, I've got a whole army of dwarves here, and these goblins will fit, and these barbarians coming from another system, and it was quite good, and we're all quite enthused by it, and I'm looking forward to getting some more games in.
Hell yeah. Yeah, well, if you don't mind me talking shop for a second, I played in a Warlords of Erehwon. It wasn't a tournament, and I'm not saying we were purposefully not saying tournament, Pilgrim. We were playing an event. No, I mean it was a friendly day. It was 3 organized games in one day. And it was run like a tournament, like the person who won kept playing people who won, and the people who lost played people who lost, and there was a tiering to it. But at the end, there was no podium. There was no. I don't even know who won the most games. It was simply by the way, it wasn't me. #. But we sat down and we played 3 good games, and it was 750 points. So yes, it was small. But people are still figuring out. And we're also in that phase where we were playing with armies that we used to have. And people are now building up new forces. And so, we wanted to have some point values that people could build to. And the next event we're going to have, hopefully in about a month, is going to be 1,000 points. So it's just getting in and playing some games. And I mean, Rick, if you were listening to the last podcast that Rick was on, which was just a couple of episodes ago, of Cast Dice, not the Warlord cast. Although when he comes on to talk about Warlords of Erehwon on that show, that's great too. But Rick, and I were talking about my bizarre eyeball army, and I said, well, screw it, I'm going to bring it. And so I pulled it out, I dusted it off, and I spent about 2 weeks trying to figure out which of the lists fit that monstrosity. And I came upon Spectral Undead. I think that was the best, the best go. And I took a list that was 5 squads of 5 skeleton archers with a Spectral Undead rule, which basically means they're sort of floaty ghosts that go through walls. But since I have like floating eyeballs, that kind of fit.
It was perfect.
Yeah, I don't know if it was perfect. Poor Lee, the TO, was just looking at me and shivering every time that I pulled a model out. But I had a necromancer as my general with a small guard squad. I paid to make him level 2, and I gave him another spell. And then I had my flying tongues, which I made light spectral horsemen with just swords, didn't have anything special on them. And I had a chariot. Which I gave the spectral rule tool as well, but I didn't tool it up. It just had scythes and the spectral rule. And I wanted to mess around with the idea of having a shooty heavy army in Warlords of Erehwon, because previously I've been playing a lot of barbarians, a lot of orcs.
I can talk to you about my elves after this if you like.
Yes, please, and we're going to talk about that in a sec. So I wanted to try that because I'd listened to you talk about shooting armies, and I wanted to try it myself. And I also wanted to play around with the idea, because when Rick first came on the Warlord cast forever ago to talk about this game, he said, now there's some people out there going to try and game the system to summon armies. And I was looking at the Spectral Undead rule, and I looked at the summoning spell, and it says, it can only work on squads of 5 or less. And went, okay, well, I'm going to have a bunch of squads of 5. And we'll see if I can get this off a couple times. Because my games previously in Warlords of Erehwon, I'm lucky to get a spell off once. And I thought, okay, we'll have some fun. We'll see what happens. And then in my first game, I was playing our good friend Jonathan, who was on before, John with the Chinese. If you remember way back a couple episodes ago, we talked about his communist Chinese army in bolt action. And I feel so bad for John, because we started playing, and first turn, Necromancer pointed to a squad and said, I'm going to try and make that. I'm going to summon some more. And I rolled like a 3, which means that he has to roll under that to dispel me. And he was like, no, I'm not going to bother. And so I was like, cool, I wonder how many I'll get. I'm a level 2, and then you get D6 skeletons plus your level. And I rolled a 6. I was like, boom, my 5 all of a sudden bumped to 13. Next turn, I do it again. This time I roll a 2 to summon. This time I roll a 6 again to summon. All of a sudden, my squads of 5 have, blown up to 13, which is huge in Warlords.
Massive in that game.
Because the biggest squad you can literally buy across the board is 10 of any race. All of a sudden, I've got 2 squads of 13. My third turn, I roll a 3 to summon, and I get 7. So instead of 8. So all of a sudden, I have 2 squads of 13, a squad of 12, and then I'm just like, okay, this is ridiculous. And so I don't want to make it sound like I steamrolled him. It was an incredibly tight game, and I won because I Hail Mary charged a squad of dwarves, and he whiffed a roll, and I beat him, and I won. But it came down to that. But But it was an awesome game. It was so much fun. But just to
Yeah.
watch his face when all of a sudden my army went blah, and it was like, and he was like, "How
just
many
exploded.
eyeballs do you have?" And I went, "This used to be a 40K army. I have a case full, and I'll keep coming." And he was just like,
Yeah.
"Well, stop it." So we go to game 2, and I was kind of hoping, that trend would continue. And I did get, one good summon off. I think I got 4 more on a squad, at which point I don't think I got it off again in that game. And I didn't win that game, but I played elves and got pretty handily shot off the board.
Yes.
Turns out elves shoot a lot better than skeletons, kids. Just at home, in case you're wondering. Even though I had a lot more, I was dumb when we deployed, and I gave him defending. I didn't understand how to destroy the towers in the mission, and I thought he's just going to shoot them out, and so I'll be better off coming in and charging him. Turns out bows can't hurt the towers, and I didn't read that part of the rules until we were halfway through the game, at which point I went, should have done that the other way. Oops. Because we just hadn't been using those. I hadn't played that mission before. And again, it comes with experience. And then the third game, I played Lee Avery, the guy who was running it. Poor Lee had to play my eyeballs when he hates them. Hi, Lee, if you're listening. And we had a great game. And I did, again, I got a good summon off. I think I summoned another 7. So I had a squad jump up to 12. But then my necromancer miscast and zapped himself off the table. He could come back later, but he still zapped himself off the table. And 2 of my squads, bolt action style, never came in from reserve. I was rolling horribly, but all of the things that I love about bolt action, just about, are in this game. The order dice. The chance that sometimes things can swing in a wacky and wild way. I love that. And I like how this game feels. I like how inclusive it is, being a miniature agnostic game. Man, I could talk about this game all day, but I walked out of that event going, holy crap, I need to paint another 6 armies. Like, I've got a pile of fantasy armies, a bunch of half-finished things. I got to get this done. I got to get my goblins done. Oh, all right, I'm talking too much, Patch. What are your thoughts? Because I know you've also played a bunch of games. You've been playing with some elves, and now you're looking at some other races. Talk to us. Because you also you ran into a unit that has been recently nerfed and is still really good.
I'm quite scarred from that. But effectively, look, I've been running, a high elf, but there is an elf list is an elf list. That's the good thing about Warlords of Erehwon is that that doesn't really differentiate between that. So you can take whatever sort of elfish style army you like and fit it into the list. But my guys are high elves, right? They're blue and they're quite posh, and they're quite shooty, right? And the first game I played against some barbarians, and I literally shot them off the table. I don't think there was much in the way of combat, maybe a little bit, but not very much, because by the time they sort of got to me, it was all over.
Yeah.
The shooting was just exceptional. And most of the units can shoot, which I took. I took a couple of the little ballistas and even their elite, the elf elite unit. I can't remember what they're called, but
guard. Yep.
The guard, they can take longbows as well. And so almost everyone's throwing some arrows down range. What we evolved in later games is people just started taking wizards, and taking the spell that protects from ranged weapons. And if they get that spell off, they effectively create this bubble, which depending on which spell you use and which level you are, depends on which coverage you have. And if you're good enough, you can pretty much keep your units in somewhat of this protective covering. And I ain't touching you.
Yeah.
I can't get through your shield, and so my entire army becomes a bit of a moot point. So it's got to shift to a more melee-focused army, which is not its strength. And so I found there was a bit of a hard counter to the shooting list.
Yeah.
And it was all about that wizard being able to put that spell up with its first order dice, or there or thereabouts before my armies can start shooting in. Yeah. And the unit that really, really did me in and I found it to be a really unbalanced unit. And I know this is still early stages and there's tweaking that need to be done, but I just felt that it was too good. And with the list, and as those who are aware of the army, you've got a separate monsters thing where effectively Rick, I think, just sort of went, people who want to play with monsters, they're super powerful, they have multiple dice per monster. Here's a separate list, but here's your normal list, so you can run with units that are compatible and not overpowered.
Totally.
And what he's done is he's included the old gyrocopter, quite an iconic unit from Warhammer Fantasy, in the dwarf list, and it has 2 activation dice. So if you've got an army that's got 7 units, you'll have 8 dice. So this helicopter, gyrocopter, can activate twice. And in order to kill the gyrocopter, he's made it very difficult for you to kill them. You've got to get it on the ground, and then you can charge it. Now, it didn't. What happened was, the scenario is it's got an incredibly great movement, and there was only sort of two sets of units that can hurt it in my army, which was some archers and the wizard, and the archers shot it down, and I'm like, yes. Look at that. You had to be miraculous rolls. I've pinned it. It's brutal. It didn't explode, but it certainly had like 4 or 5 pins on it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is just great. I've been able to neutralize this, and I'm going to send some units in to charge on it. And my opponent pulled the next dice out, and he goes, I rally. And all of a sudden that gyrocopter is back up in the air with 4 pins.
So hold on.
Like,
I've been thinking about this. So if he rallied, isn't it still on the ground?
No, because a rally will take all the pins away and put it back up in the air. So now I've got no more units that can hurt it, and it's back up in the air with no pins. So very start of the next turn, it gets the first 2 dice, it moves forward, and it takes out my archers and my mage, and it's now hovering above my army with absolutely zero ability for my army to hurt it.
Yeah.
And we called the game off at that point for that particular one, because there was absolutely no point, because each unit he would be deleting 2 of my forces.
Yeah.
And with Warlords of Erehwon, the loss of 1 squad is brutal.
You feel it, yeah.
The loss of 2 squads a turn, your army will break very quickly.
Yeah.
So there's some balancing that still needs to happen. And I would even be tempted to say, even if it only had 1 order dice, it would be much more balanced.
Yeah.
But so it'd be interesting to see what tweaking they've put into it. I'll have to do some work, but it's just, I thought, I just don't know how to counter that. And I think a good game system, and one that makes you want to come back, is where you can sort of go, I got pantsed this game. Like, I got pantsed. I did everything wrong.
Yes.
But you know what? If I tweak my list, if I do this slightly different tactic, I'll go better next time.
Yeah.
And I know how to defeat it. But I kind of walked away from that game going, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
There's nothing currently I've got that could possibly, counter that. So I had to sort of, have a think about that and see. And I don't think, to be honest, I'd really want to play that particular unit again. Yeah. Because the dwarves are a very strong force.
Yeah, they're sort of the army, at least locally, they're the army to beat.
I think that would be universal, mate, because they're just so resilient.
Yeah.
It's like a wall of iron coming at you.
I mean, they do. I mean, if you look, they do cost significantly more than other armies.
Yeah.
Which balances, but you're right. They feel tough because they are the only force in the game that is consistently strong and tough. Sure, they're pointed for it. I mean, an average dwarf, if you look at Rick's pointing system, and we'll get to that in a minute, is literally twice the points as a basic human. Stats-wise, they're literally twice. But man, sometimes when you face those dwarves, you just feel like you're bouncing off. But then having made, because I have both dwarf and other lists, if I put them side by side, man, I'm getting a lot more bang for my buck. If I'm buying, I like to buy cheap. I like to build armies that have a lot of units and have some variety. If you're playing dwarves, you got a couple units of basic dwarves. You got maybe a unit of shooty dwarves. You got a lord. You got a mage. You're done. At 750, 800 points, that's it.
It's an elite unit. Yeah.
Yeah. But man, sometimes it doesn't feel good when you hit them and you're going, how did I not beat that unit? It's because you got to team up on them. And so because I played 2 dwarf players on the weekend, I was very much into okay, how am I going to beat this? So there would be a big unit of dwarves in front of me. I would shoot them twice with units sort of on the side, get the pins in, because that factors into combat res. And then I would charge them with a unit of 12 skeletons with swords and be like, because the archers come with swords. And I was like, fine, go in, bang. And it wasn't great combat results, but by getting those pins in early, I was able to, swing combat enough that I could put that hurt on. And I mean, you got to think about it a little bit more with dwarves, don't you?
Yeah, it's certainly not an easy thing, and I kind of felt I was going to be on the back foot, particularly with that shooty army, and then my opponent's a very clever player, and he was able just to put that umbrella up and just counter what I've my ability to soften them up before they even got to my line. So there was sort of that, what have I got? My one trick pony has just been just ridden off. But can I tell you just two things that I really like about the system, which is tweaked from the order dice system from Bolt Action.
Please go ahead.
Two actions which I really like. Well, the first one I'll talk about is the down.
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes. So good.
Okay. Yeah. And so you'll have to correct me if I get this in wrong. But basically, you can flip an order dice if I'm going to shoot at your unit, for example, right? So my fancy pantsy elves are going to shoot at a unit in the open, and you go, I don't really, that's going to hurt. Yeah. I'm going to go down. So you can pull an order dice out and put it into the down, right, for free. There's no order check for that.
Correct.
Now in Bolt Action, what that would give you, so nothing's different yet, but what it would give you in Bolt Action is an extra +2 cover.
Correct.
Right?
-2.
So it's going to be harder to hit you.
Right.
Yeah. What it does in Warlords of Erehwon is go, well, we're not going to give any +2 to hit. We're going to make you hit them twice.
That's right.
So you might, throw 6 dice at them, and you might hit on average, say, 4 times.
Yep.
But then you've got to roll those 4 dice again.
Right. So you have to re-roll hits. Yeah.
You re-roll hits. So the average says you'll probably get 2 hits.
Right.
So it's reducing the hits on target, which I think is a really good mechanic.
It is.
And because everything comes with a negative, doesn't it?
It does.
The negative is at the end of your turn, if you want to put that dice back in the bag so that your unit can act in a different way next turn, you've got to pass a morale check.
So good.
Yeah. So if I've managed to get a couple of pins on you from shooting and you fail that morale check, well, you're staying down. That dice is staying on the table, so you're out for 2 units, for two turns. Yeah, so that was the main one that I was thinking about, and the next one that I really like is the run move.
Right. Okay. Yes. Now are you? Yeah. Go ahead, because I want to add to that. Go ahead.
Yeah. I really like the run move, which is effectively just like a full sprint. And so you have, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you effectively have a normal advance move or a run move. But you have this kind of it's like a super run move, which allows you to go, some units to go 3 times the distance, right? Is that correct?
So the way it works is, now I'm talking basic units. There are units that go faster and slower, and fast units which do other things entirely. But in a basic unit, models advance, just like in Bolt Action, except they advance 5 inches. If you run, you can run twice your walk. So you can run up to 10 for a basic squad. No problems. That's it. You just run like normal. Or you can do something called sprint. And if you
Yes.
sprint, you can move 3 times your movement, but you need to pass a test. Now, it's an agility test from memory. Now, if you
Yes, that's
pass the
correct.
agility test, no problems. You're good. So you need to roll under your agility. Now, if you fail that roll, though, you gain a pin. Now, again, pins count for combat resolution. So they're almost like wounds in combat allocation, in combat resolution.
Yeah.
So if you, and remember, when you charge into combat, you're running. So if you sprint, if you go for the long bomb, Hail Mary-esque charge to get in there, and you charge 14 inches to get into combat, for most forces in the game, you have about a 50% chance that you're going to be taking an extra pin.
Yeah.
And that pin, again, counts for combat res. And if they shoot you coming in, that's another pin. So
Well, you could be all of a sudden on hitting them on 4 or less on a
Right.
D10.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that really means that your chances of doing much is very minimal. So you've got to weigh it up. But what I like about it is that the ability to make that massive tactical move and to all of a sudden shift. So it's not just 2 static lines facing each other. All of a sudden, one flank, which you've left exposed a little bit, has just around 15 inches up the table.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
like that capability, so it can shift and it can flow. And the other part about the run move is there's that special rule that if you had run on some units, then you get the first dice.
Yeah. Yeah. And now they have FAQ'd. One of the big FAQs was for units that have the fast rule. So if you have the fast rule, you have the ability to leave the run order on the table and run again. But they FAQ'd that with half a page of text for just that one rule. So I need to reread it before I comment on how they've changed it, but I know it's been cleaned up considerably because people, first edition rule set, it's a great game. But if you're going to nitpick a couple of things, one of the things was, people could make an army that were all fast, and then they could just run the whole time, and they would get to activate a bunch of dice before their opponents got a chance to pull their first dice out of the
strike.
bag.
Yeah.
Right. And Rick immediately said, "Look, that's not how this was supposed to. This is not how this was supposed to play out, guys." And leave it to gamers to break crap. But I think that's changed. And I know that's been reined in. I need to go back and reread the exact FAQ. But how good is it that we have a game developer who and I know I said this on the last podcast, but I want to say it again. I think this is really important for Warlords of Erehwon. There's a lot of game companies. If you play bolt action, it's not as much the case at all. But if you play games for, Warhammer, especially in the olden days, there was the idea of codex creep. You would constantly try and, encourage your customers to buy the new book by making the models in them really good or powerful, and making, the army of the week almost feeling. But all of that would be sales driven. And I used to work in corporate sales for Games Workshop, so I know what I'm talking about there. Now, Rick isn't selling models. Rick isn't selling army books. Rick isn't selling almost anything. So literally, this is a game that is designed to be equal, to be balanced. Now, he's still working that out, but Rick's an incredibly talented game designer. And what he's done is he's created a website, thisgaminglife.uk. And if you go to it, he literally has posted every army list in the game. And he's updated every single one of them. And he's added samurai. He's added lizardmen, army lists that were not in the book. And this week, we got the point value calculator for Warlords of Erehwon. He literally put out, put the keys to the castle, so to speak. And he said, look, there are some armies that I cannot make because they will violate other companies' IP, Games Workshop. But let me give you the army building tools, because I know some of you have armies that you desperately want to play, and I cannot make those armies. But let me give you the tools. Or if you want to come up with your own thing, be as creative as you like. Here are the point values for every single statistic, for every single rule, for every single weapon, for anything in the game. You want to make a new race? No problem. Here it all is. And it's awesome. And I feel like I know we talk about the community of bolt action. I feel like the community for Warlord, I mean, it's small, but people are pretty committed, and they're going, yeah, no, this is great. We need to be careful not to turn this into a min-maxing exercise.
We're gamers, mate. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. But people are saying, let's not try and break the crap out of this. Let's enjoy this game. Let's savor it. And so I went out of my way to try and create, for example, I'm trying to come up with rules for plague demons, not to talk about any company's intellectual property. But I came up with the idea of what you would, if you were looking at Games Workshop models, a plague bearer. And I came up with the idea of a model that has strength 5, so human strength, with a sword, so human strength, but with lower agility and resistance 7. So it's kind of slow. And is, in fact, I gave it the slow rule, so it moves 1 inch less than everything else. But is tough, but doesn't have armor. Has like poison weaponry rules. And I was basically able to recreate a plague bearer. Now you could do it a number of different ways, but I did that and I posted it online, and it led to a really interesting conversation in the Facebook group of people saying, "Oh, is that too tough? Let's think about this." And then people were debating it because I gave it the regeneration rule, which is typically seen on trolls. Now, regeneration is great for regenerating wounds, but what people were arguing about why it isn't necessarily too powerful, which I thought was really neat, was you can take the hits from regeneration and you can regenerate them, but you still take the pins. And in this game, pins are key. So it's a balancing factor. And people are like, if that wasn't there, this would probably be too tough. Is it legal? 100%. But people are having that debate of, is this cool? Would I like to play against it? And I think that's a really neat conversation to be having 5 minutes after Rick Priestley, the guy who invented 40K, gives you the Bible to make an army in his game.
Yeah, he's giving you the keys.
So good.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think it's fantastic, and it's really putting the ownership of the game back in the hands of the gamers.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, and it's good that he's interacting with it, and it's free.
Right. Right.
Can we complain about it?
No.
Like, if we complain about it, will he give us our money back?
Exactly. I mean, he's paying for this website out of his pocket. He's doing this. Yeah. This is his retirement project. He's having he's having fun with it. And he's still putting out new army lists. I mean, I think a couple people locally were a little worried that if he gives us the point value calculator, like that's it, he's done. But no, he's not. He's already said he's gonna do possibly a second Lizardman list / a second iteration of the Lizardman list to include some units that people desperately want that maybe they can't field at the moment. And then he's talking about Ratmen. I know there's been a lot of debate about demons of different religious varieties. I mean, the man's invested, and he's part of the Facebook group. I mean, it's awesome. It's a great game. It's a great community. I'm just a big fan. Sorry,
I think it's great. It's good. It's sort of ticking the box at the moment for my fantasy army genre, and so and I like the fact that it's only 20 or 30 miniatures.
Yeah, right. So good. Yeah,
I had a bit of a giggle. I'm a bit AOS curious, right? And I think once you get to a point, you kind of like, well, everyone's playing it. It must be something really good about it, and there's lots of good things about AOS. So
yes,
I
there
hear.
is.
And I just sort of asked a few questions, and I've got these witch elves, and these are the really old witch elves, and I painted a bunch of them up, and I think they're fantastic. And I'm like, maybe I can make some sort of like witch elf army in AOS. And some bloke goes, yeah, witch elves are fantastic. They're really good, but you're probably going to need about 120 of them.
Yeah.
And I've gone, I'm not really that AOS curious.
Exactly. And kids, if you're paying attention at home, this is the man that, since we started podcasting tonight, probably painted 10 models while we're talking. I'm just saying.
I have done all the skin tones on 3 witch elves. But do you know what I mean? Like it's sort of, wow, that's fantastic. But by the 30 or 40th witch elf, I'm not going to be wanting to paint much in the that might just sort of blunt the enthusiasm. Whereas
just a little bit.
If I wanted to make a Warlords of Erehwon army, and one of the I think, sorry, I know we're sort of harping on it. We'll probably have to head off soon, but one of the great things about Warlords of Erehwon is you can make a really themed force however you want to make it.
Yes.
And so I've created this force, and I've called it the Defenders of Sherwood Deep. And what it is an entirely like range style force, which is like Robin Hood and his merry band of men, but a real sort of deep forest mix of humans and elves, and so I've got I think about 30 miniatures so far painted in that nice greens and browns, and that's going to be my list. And I've got some treemen and some various other things I want to throw in, and that's where the real the themes for your force are so open.
That's right.
There's no limitations on it. It's going to be, I can use it as a human list, I can use it as an elf list, I could probably mix it around and maybe use it as a beastman list. I'm not sure, there's options for it, and that's what's really nice is your imagination can just explode. You're not on those railway lines of forced army themes.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I got into AOS because a lot of my friends were getting back into it. I tried to play really hard, and I kept pulling out army lists and going, cool, I've got all these models, and huge armies for Warhammer for 8th edition, which were big armies. And then I pulled out the Age of Sigmar books and I was looking at them and I'm like, okay, this is like 60% of an army. But huge chunks of it I couldn't use. And I was like, what the crap? And then all of a sudden I get Warlords going on, and just the first case I opened, which was Warriors of Chaos, opened it up. Yeah. Holy crap. I've got at least 6 ways to play this army right now. And I've got a horde of barbarians. I've got a horde of horsemen. I've got variations thereof. I've got, elite berserker type models. I mean, just the variation, and just you need the fewer models, as you said.
Yeah.
But
like you, I've got an entire Dark Elf army sitting there. And apparently it's split up between like 4 or 5 different factions.
Right?
But you could, and I was reading up about it. But you can mix them together if you stand on one leg and put your finger in your ear. You might be able to move this here. And I'm like,
but only on Tuesday. Yeah.
Like I really want to, and I have no doubt that I will look into it more in the future. But I'm quite intimidated by AOS at the moment.
Yeah.
And just it's difficult for me to sort of commit to it, where I feel like I almost have to study it for a couple of months just to feel confident about moving into it.
Yeah. And it's got one of the biggest communities going at the moment.
It's huge.
It's massive.
So many
People
good things about it.
Super passionate about it. The painting the hobby standards to an incredible level. People really getting into the gaming. I mean, just the technology. I mean, people are streaming so many games, so many events. Just this past weekend, the Dwellers Below had their Lord of War event, and so all those games were streamed, and just massive community outpouring for this game. I just wish I had one army I could play.
I know. It's almost like I wish I almost like I feel like I might have missed the boat with it.
Yeah.
And that I didn't get in at the ground level when it came in, and now I feel it might be too advanced.
See, I tried to come in, and it was tough.
tough then. See, whereas
man.
I came in with Warhammer 40,000 when 8th edition started.
Yeah.
So I felt like I came in at an even level where everyone was starting afresh, and I've been able to learn the system as everyone else has learned it. Maybe that's the difference. Then again, maybe we're just trying to play too many games.
Bite your tongue. That is not the purpose of this podcast. What are you talking about?
Yes, I shouldn't have said that.
No.
Play
You're
all
out.
the games.
on that note,
Yep.
Patch, God, man, I'm sure we could do this for days. Literally, I'm sure we could just sit here and wax rhapsodical about all the games that we are loving playing at the moment. But Patch, is there anything else you wanna quickly say? Because I know our time's wrapping. I know you got to go, but is there anything else? Have we gone around the horn, or is there anything else you want to bring up?
No, I think I just hope that people enjoy you and I talking to each other.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You and me both.
Yeah. So I kind of forgot halfway along the lines that we're actually doing a cast. So
What do you mean?
I hope people don't find it too boring.
Yeah, me too. Literally, me too. But it has been, it has honestly been a total pleasure just to sit down and to talk. I mean, again, we do it constantly, but it's through, words. In order to written word, it's amazing to actually sit down and get the nuance and the sarcasm and the laughing. It's great to hear you laugh again, man. Because after all those years of podcasting, it's great to. It's just good to hear you, man.
I'll do it again soon if you want.
Please come on back. Let's do it. Let's play some more Erehwon, and I'll play some more, and then we'll have lots to talk about.
Great.
Now, to quote our good friend Casey Pittman, I have to say that when you are playing the games that we know and love, I hope that your dice are rolling hot. I hope your beverages are cold. But more than anything else, we at Cast Dice hope you are having fun.
Ciao.
Good night.
Another day rising, Paraguayan sun. The food cracks open, another Heineken. He's all alone. He's in his little room. He's all alone with a Burmese python and a He sleeps by day, but not for very long. He dozes off, and that's when the chase is on. In his dreams, one who knows that scent, faceless men with Russian winter. That's when you little man, on the tropical Capricorn without a tan. Neatest man this world has seen, beat up every night in his dreams. His friends are gone, and they're tracked by hungry hounds. The ruby's gone, and the terror's